Chapter 8. Why I Love My Mom. My first day back at college sophomore year was September 11, 2001. I had just left New York the day before, and my best friend Chris and I were sharing a dorm room. His mother called at 9 a.m., a solid 2 hours before I planned to wake up. She called on our landline, which was the only way she could get through, since cell phones weren't working. I didn't even know we even had a landline, let alone what the number was. But mothers are enterprising. I answered, and she said, "Are you watching a TV? A plane just flew into the World Trade Center. I want Chris to know I'm okay." Normally, his mom worked inside the World Trade Center, and that day she happened to get assigned to a different location, which was a miracle. I handed Chris the phone, then he turned to me and said, "What about your mom?" My mom, Dr. Carrie Kelly, she kept her maiden name, was chief medical officer for the New York City Fire Department for 24 years. She was reappointed by 4 different mayors, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. And as far as I can tell from my cursory online research, she was the longest-serving chief of any department in New York City history. For comparison, Ray Kelly was the longest-serving police commissioner in city history, and he did it for a decade less. She was the first woman to serve as chief medical officer and the first female doctor to ever join the FDNY. She joined the fire department, like many do, because her father and grandfather were both firemen, along with her brother Billy, who became an FDNY dispatcher. She said that the fire department felt like home. It was a tight-knit community, which is also how she described Staten Island. That's why when she got married, she moved into the house next door to her parents and down the street from 2 of her uncles and 3 of her cousins, who, yes, were all firemen. It was a very tight-knit community. A big part of her job was responding to major fires in New York and treating first responders who were injured on the scene. When I was growing up, she would come to my bedroom to say goodnight, and I would ask, "Are you going to bed too, Mom?" "No, Mommy has to work tonight." "Where is work?" "It's at a huge fire in the Bronx. Now sleep tight." Hearing that your mother is going to a fire in the middle of the night is one of the worst things a child can hear before falling asleep. My greatest fear growing up was that my mom would go to a fire and never come back. So on September 11th, it would have made total sense for her to respond when the planes hit the Twin Towers. But as we huddled around a TV in our friend's dorm, it was not even 10 a.m. yet, and since my mom would be coming from Staten Island, I made a quick calculation in my head that she couldn't possibly have driven into Lower Manhattan that quickly. Then we watched on TV as the South Tower collapsed, and I started getting really scared. An hour earlier, my mom was at a hospital on Staten Island visiting one of her patients, Mrs. Murray. In addition to the fire department, my mom also maintained a family medicine practice and visited her patients in the hospital when they were sick. She received a message on her beeper, yes, she still used a beeper, that a plane had crashed into the World Trade Center. She didn't want to scare Mrs. Murray, so she told her, "Oh, I've got to run. Have a nice day." But the patient next to Mrs. Murray had the TV on. She yelled, "Oh my God, a plane just hit the World Trade Center." "Oh my goodness," said Mrs. Murray. "All my sons are firefighters." "Don't worry," my mom said. "They'll all be fine." Then she ran to her car and drove to Manhattan. When she arrived 1 block south of the World Trade Center, her first thought was, "I can't believe I found a parking spot." A thought that only a New Yorker could have. Then she saw a car parked across the street, and it was charred and smoldering like it had been consumed by lava. Suddenly, the parking spot seemed a lot less lucky. "Hey, what are you doing here?" a firefighter was yelling at her. She recognized him. It was Captain Hank Sarasoli. "Where's your helmet? There's stuff falling everywhere." "I don't have a helmet," she said. Then she looked up and saw pieces of the tower falling. And then she saw bodies falling. We need to get you a helmet, he said. They walked to ladder 10, the firehouse directly next to the south tower. She didn't know which tower is which, and she didn't know that a second plane had just crashed. She only saw smoke billowing down and body parts all around her on the street. She told Captain Sarasoli, "I need to get to the command center." He handed her a helmet, and they started walking toward the south tower. On the way out, she saw on the firehouse television that a third plane had hit the Pentagon. That's when she knew it was a terrorist attack. When my friends and I saw the third plane hit the Pentagon, suddenly everywhere in America felt vulnerable. It seems really stupid in retrospect, but we genuinely thought there could be an attack at Harvard next, especially since 2 of the hijacked planes left from Boston. No one knew where to go on campus, and everyone from New York or D.C. was really freaking out. I kept trying to reach my mom or my dad or my brother on the phone, but nothing was going through. We got an email from the professor in charge of our dorm. It said, "Try to remain calm, but stay in touch with the news." I thought, maybe my dad will check his email. I wrote, "Dad, what's going on? Are you home? Assuming Mom is okay?" There's a reason people use walkie-talkies in action movies. When her phone and her beeper both failed, my mom used the walkie-talkie feature on her Nextel cell phone for the first time in her life, and it actually worked. "Hello?" It was Deputy Commissioner Lynn Tierney, a friend of my mom's and another woman who had been a pioneer in city government. "Lynn, it's Dr. Kelly. Where are you? Where's the command center?" "We're moving out of the North Tower now. We're heading across the street into the World Financial Center." "Okay, I'll meet you there." As she hung up, a firefighter ran over and said, "Doc, you gotta help. One of our guys is injured." She walked over and saw Danny Sir, a fireman who had been setting up at the South Tower when he was hit by a falling body. His skull was crushed and he was bleeding terribly. She got him into an ambulance and tried to resuscitate him, but there was nothing she could do. "Get him to the hospital," she said. "Are you coming too?" the fireman asked. "I have to stay here," she said, "but a few of you go with him and make sure he gets there." Danny Sir, whose nickname was Captain America, was the first firefighter to die on 9/11. But he saved the lives of the firemen who went with him in that ambulance. Because as it pulled away, Captain Sarasoli turned to my mom and said, "The building is falling." She said, "What building?" Then she looked up and the first tower was starting to collapse. He yelled, "Run!" I've asked my dad what he was thinking that morning, what he thought was happening with Mom. He told me that he never thought my mom could have gotten there before the towers fell. He did the same calculation that I had done. We both had too much faith in New York City traffic to worry about Mom reaching Manhattan in time. My brother was in high school on Staten Island and could see the smoke from the towers through his classroom window. But he wasn't worried about my mom. He was worried about his classmates whose fathers were firemen and were much more likely to be in danger. The hardest part of my mom's job was that she had to inform family members when a firefighter died in the line of duty. While I was afraid of her going to a fire and never coming back, she had to actually tell the children of firefighters that their father or mother wasn't coming home. And when a firefighter was seriously burned or injured in a fire, she was there with the family at the hospital, which is how she met the family of Timothy Stackpole. Tim had been severely burned while putting out a fire in Brooklyn in 1998. The building collapsed, and 2 of his fellow firemen died. Tim was in the burn unit of the hospital for 66 days and received skin grafts for burns so severe that you could see the bone. Almost 3 years later, in March 2001, he returned to full duty of the fire department. Like my mom, he didn't know a life without it. There's a saying in the department, 20 and out, because after 20 years on the job, you can retire and get a pension and do whatever you want with the rest of your life. Tim used to tell my mom 40 and out. because you're either in for life, or you're not really. When the first tower fell, Captain Sarasoli realized it couldn't outrun it. He instinctively grabbed my mom and pushed her against an alcove of the World Financial Center building across the street. They pressed against the wall, and everything around them turned black. All they heard was noise, and all they felt was debris piling on top of them. She said that she was waiting to die. And in that moment, she thought of Tim Stackpole and 40 and out, and how that's always what she planned to do too. She realized, I already have 20 years. What the hell am I still doing here? Then a few minutes passed, and they were still alive. Then a few minutes more. Then the tower stopped falling, and there was suddenly silence. It was pitch black, and she thought that even if they survived, they'd be buried alive under all the debris. Then the air cleared just a little when they saw light. And Captain Sarasoli said, we have to get out and find the others. It was at this moment, as they clawed their way out of the rubble and back to some semblance of a street, that my mother looked down and realized she was still wearing sandals. They started calling out the names of the firemen they had seen just before the building collapsed, but they couldn't hear anyone, and they couldn't see more than a foot or two in front of them. The debris in the air was like a driving snowstorm, only black instead of white. She said it felt like being in a blizzard in the middle of the night. Then, out of nowhere, she saw her car, still parked in the same spot and somehow only partially buried. She said to Captain Sarasoli, I'm changing my shoes. What? You're changing them now? I just survived death. I've had it. I'm getting out of these sandals. She pulled sneakers out of the back seat of her car and changed into shorts and a t-shirt, plus a borrowed fire helmet. Then she and Captain Sarasoli walked back toward the second tower, back into the blizzard, in search of someone to help. The first person they found was a firefighter named Kevin Shea, who had lost his thumb and been hit in the head by falling debris. He was so disoriented or concussed that he didn't even realize the first tower had fallen. He would later find out that every single firefighter in his company who responded to the attacks had died, except for him. They dragged Kevin out of the debris and into a parking garage 1 block south of the towers. His neck was badly injured, and my mom knew he needed some kind of gurney and an ambulance. Then another firefighter appeared out of the smoke and started helping my mother tend to the wounded and move them into safety of the garage. His name was Mike Shepard, and 3 years earlier, my mother had told him he could never become a firefighter because he had a metal plate in his foot. So Mike went straight to his doctor and said, "Take the plate out of my foot." 9 weeks later, he was a New York City firefighter. Mike was a Golden Gloves boxing champion and an iron worker in his spare time. The morning of September 11th, he was actually off duty welding a girder in the basement of Carnegie Hall to earn extra money. When he heard the towers had been hit, he jumped on the back of a passing fire truck and rode to Ground Zero. Now when he and my mom were roaming the streets looking for an ambulance, or at least bandages and supplies. They were about to break into a dentist office when they heard a deafening noise above him. Mike grabbed my mom's hand and started running. The second tower was falling. For the second time in the span of half an hour, a fireman saved my mother's life. Mike Shepard pushed her through the revolving door of a lobby as pieces of the second tower exploded past the window. It was the first of several times Mike would be a hero that day. He spent 30 straight hours at the site, searching and digging for any survivors he could find. He would see my mom later that day at the new command center near St. Paul's Chapel. My mom gave Mike a hug and said, "You saved my life." Weeks later, Mike visited the medical office, haunted by all the friends he couldn't save. My mom gave him a hug again and said, "You did everything you could." In the moments after he rescued her, though, they stood in the dark lobby of an office building, watching the black air swirl around outside the window. and they didn't know what would fall next. I still have the email that I got from my dad that day at 11:51 a.m. Mom's okay. She did get caught in the secondary collapse, but dug herself out and is okay. Wow. I'll keep in touch. He barely saw my mom for weeks. At some point, she came home, covered head to toe in white ash. She showered, changed clothes, and went right back to work. She spent each day traveling between Ground Zero and the medical office, treating whoever needed help. After she survived the second collapse, she said she felt like a medic in a war zone. She would keep bandaging people up, only to realize they had died. She had gotten Kevin Shea and the other injured firemen from the parking garage into ambulances and had them evacuated to a hospital. Then she set up a triage center in a Duane Reade down the street, only to be evacuated again when a third building, 7 World Trade Center, was about to collapse. They moved the triage unit to the auditorium at Pace University and waited for the injured to arrive, but no one came. What arrived instead, in waves, was news of the people who had died. Dear friends of hers like Chief Gansey, who oversaw the entire department that morning for the base of the first tower. Commissioner Fian, who was the oldest first responder to die that day at the age of 71. And Father Michael Judge, their chaplain, who died while administering last rites to a fallen firefighter. In the family of the fire department, these were her brothers. They were people she loved dearly, and it was now setting in that she would never see them again. At 9 p.m., a full 12 hours since she left Mrs. Murray at the hospital in Staten Island, my mother closed down the triage center. She realized that all the first responders, the injured first responders she expected to arrive, were already dead. In total, 343 firefighters lost their lives, including Scott Davidson, father of my future SNL castmate Pete Davidson, who was only 8 years old at the time, and Tim Stackpole, back on the job for less than 6 months, who had taught my mother the meaning of 40 and out. The work they did, they saved thousands of civilian lives as they evacuated the lower floors of the towers and put out fires that had spread to the surrounding buildings. In the wake of September 11th, more than 2,000 new recruits joined the FDNY. There are many reasons why I love my mom. I love that while she took care of her fire department family, she never neglected her real family. We never felt like she was absent or not fully present in our lives. I love her as a role model. Because of her, my brother and I have never thought twice about women doing the same jobs as men, or getting the same pay, or having completely independent and satisfying lives. If anything, we expect to see it more because that's all we knew. I love how caring and thoughtful she is toward my dad, and how they rely on each other and help each other get through hard times. And I love how she wrangles her grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins to come together for every holiday and birthday and anniversary, even the cousins who aren't firemen. Most of all, I love how grateful my mom is. She would always tell us, I have the luckiest job in the world. And somehow she felt that even more after September 11th. I'm so proud of how my mom responded that day, and I'm even more proud of the work she did in the days, months, and years that followed. She helped modernize the department to prepare for any future attacks, and she put in real time with the families who lost someone that day. She testified before the U.S. Senate and helped secure millions in funding for the long-term care of 9/11 first responders, including a screening process for the types of cancers and lung problems that no one considered when they ran in to save people's lives. And she helped create a counseling unit to help firefighters deal with the psychological effects of having survived when so many of their friends did not. She told Congress, in the department's first 100 years, we filled a wall with the names of fallen firefighters. On the 11th of September, we filled a new wall. She would never say that she was a hero because she's very humble and because she knows how much firefighters risk every day doing their jobs. But she's been a real, lasting hero for a long time. She protected and improved the lives of thousands of firefighters. And when you talk to them about my mom, you can tell they love her because they know how much she cares about them. She retired from the fire department in March 2018. She did 40 and out to the day. My mom drove up to visit me at college in late October 2001. It was the first day she had taken off since September 11th. I didn't know she was coming, and I was so happy and surprised to see her. I said, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "I needed a hug."